In one of my last videos I asked you if you knew a very important attacking ideas, the rook swing or rook lift. And this was in the context of attack. But in the game we are going to look at the rook lift was also attacking something, but it didn't contribute so much to an attack, but positional idea, just improving the pieces and putting pressure on the opponent's pawn. And the game we are going to take a look at is Alexander Motulev against Hans Niemann, two very strong grandmasters, and Hans Niemann seems to be in the shape of his life, chess-wise. Actually, he's playing so strong that many players are complaining or accusing him of cheating. But we are not going to talk about these accusations in this video. So next to me you can see a position, and here it is white to move. This position occurred in the game, and as you can see, white's position is not too great, so white should just find a way to survive. This being said, let me know your opinion in the comment section, and let's go to the game. Alexander Motulev playing the white pieces starts the game with first e4, and Hans Niemann responds with e6. d4, d5. Now the question is, which variation of the French are we going to see? Maybe a move like knight to c3, or knight to d2, the Tarrasch variation, or maybe even the exchange. So Motulev chose to play e5, the advanced variation, and of course black must strike in the center immediately with c5. White plays c3, knight to c6, and as you can see, black is constantly putting pressure towards the center. Knight to f3, bishop to d7, bishop to e2. And here Niemann chose the very popular knight g to e7 line. This knight is going to either g6 or f5, either here or here, because the e7 square cannot be the target, the final target of the knight. So white castles, and now black plays knight to f5, and white decides to take on c5. At first, this might look somehow strange, because now the bishop on c5 can be developed immediately with bishop takes c5, and is developed and on a good square. However, white could later push the bishop away with a move like b4 and bishop to b6, and the game continues. Maybe it is already white who is fighting for an advantage. And of course, Hans Niemann didn't want his opponent to play for an advantage, so he played a very strange looking move but very logical move, a5. It prevents b4 and prepares bishop takes c5. However, this gives white time to go for another plan, and the plan is bishop to d3. As you can see, the e6 pawn is defending d5 but also f5, so it looks like it is overloaded. Bishop takes c5 still, and now bishop takes f5, e takes f5. Black has the pair of bishops, but white is up a pawn, so white has plenty of compensation, and the position is probably very good for white. Still no big advantage, but a nice position. Now black continues with queen to b6 and queen to b3 played. Now black, of course, doesn't want to take on b3, because then the a file opens and it's the white rook which is putting pressure on a5. Bishop to e6 instead. So queen takes b6, bishop takes b6, and this bishop on b6 is a very nice piece. At some point it might just drop back to c7 and put more pressure against the e5 pawn. And still, white is up a pawn. So it's 7 against 6 pawns. So indeed, black must play actively. Knight to a3, and black castles. Now rook to e1, overprotecting the e5 pawn, and maybe preparing a move like knight to g5. Black plays a4. Knight to g5 had been a good move here, but after bishop to d5, there is no real or no big advantage for white, although he could go for a move like c4, forcing the bishop back to e6, and now think about capturing it. And here black is down a pawn and there is no pair of bishops, but the e-pawn isn't too strong and the position isn't really open on the queen side, so where white has the pawn majority, so white will still have a hard time trying to convert the extra pawn. But let's go back. In the game, knight to c2 was played, a very logical move, aiming to put the knight on a better square, and now rook to a5. And if you follow my channel, you probably know the video about the rook swing or rook lifts. By the way, if you want to support this channel, feel free to subscribe it. But now let's come back to the rook lift. This idea of pushing a pawn to a5 and then a4 and put the rook on a5 is familiar to us, because in a recent video, which I will add in the end, white played a4, a5, then took on b6 and then played the rook along the a file and then swing it over to the queen side. Here, however, black is following another idea, but we will see. White plays a3, rook to b5, maybe not the most accurate move, but still also not a bad move. Knight to b4, and now knight to a5. Bishop to e3, and of course, black doesn't want to exchange the bishops, but put pressure on the e5 pawn. So bishop to c7, rook a to d1, knight c4, bishop c1 back, h6, knight to d3, rook d8. Still, the position is around equal. Knight to d4, rook b to d5. And now you can see that black managed to put his or build up a battery of rooks on the d file. So white's plan was fine, but it allows this idea. King to f1, and now bishop takes e5. And in the beginning of the video, you were asked which move you would play here. And the move which should have been played here probably was knight takes e5. And after knight takes e5, black regained the pawn and also lost the pair of bishops. So one might make the point that this is an okay trade for white. However, white is slightly worse here, and black is fighting for a win. However, achieving a win from this position would be very difficult. In the game, knight to b4 followed, so the rook is attacked, but the rook just goes back to d6, and then the knight dropped back to c2. And now it is black's turn again, and black decides to go for a very aggressive move, g5. It might look dangerous for black to push the g-pawn, but if you consider the character of the center, which is basically dissolved, but black has absolute control over the center, so, and considering the fact that the queens are gone, obviously, black is absolutely fine with playing g5. It is actually white who should take care and probably just take on e6 and accept an maybe equal, maybe slightly worse position after f takes e6 and rook takes d6. And it's not clear how black wants to win this position. However, in the game, white played very aggressively and played h4, attacking the g5 pawn twice. So white is ready to take on g5. However, g takes h4 was played, and bishop takes h6 might fail due to f4. And now the bishop doesn't look too strong on h6. So you need to get it back into the game somehow. But it's not obvious how white wants to achieve this. So this position is already better for black. More than slightly better. Therefore, Motulev, a very strong grandmaster, decided to go king to e2. Then followed bishop to d7. Of course, in the long run, black wants to keep the pair of bishops. So f4 played, bishop to f6. Knight to e3 and rook to e8, pinning the knight. King to f3, and now the knight takes on e3, bishop takes on e3, and black finally decides to give up the pair of bishops for bishop takes d4, because after bishop takes d4 there is bishop c6 check, and this bishop is attacking the g2 pawn, which will turn out to be very unpleasant for white in the future. King f2, rook takes e1, rook takes e1, rook g6. As mentioned, g2 is weak and cannot be pushed because of the h-pawn on h4. The black h-pawn, obviously. Rook to g1, the only move to defend the pawn. Rook g4. Bishop e3, of course. Black is threatening to take on f4 and white must defend it. Then followed b5, bishop to d2, bishop to e4. And after bishop e3, now white is in a bad position. He's obviously losing. It's black's turn, and the idea is what to play here. And Hans Niemann found a very easy looking and beautiful plan, just to activate the king with king f8. After bishop c5, the king went to e8, bishop e3, because white is lacking good moves. h5, putting the pawn on the white square. Bishop c1, king e7, bishop e3, king e6. And out of desperation, white plays c4, and after b takes c4, white is down 2 pawns. However, these double pawns do not look that great yet, although they are more than enough for winning the game. But we will see how this is done. Bishop to d2, king to d5, bishop e3 back, and now a very strong move, c3. Now white is forced to take on c3, the king goes to c4, bishop to c1, and king takes c3. Bishop e3, king b3, so now you can see that the a3 pawn is also very weak, and bishop to c1 played. And here black played rook to g8, and Alexander Motulev decided to resign here. But why? Let's just see a couple of moves to understand the idea of black. King f1, rook c8, king e2, and now rook to c2 check. Bishop to d2 can be answered by king takes a3, and a move like king to d1 is answered by bishop takes g2. It's very important not to take with the rook. Taking with the rook might be dangerous for black because suddenly it seems like the conversion of the advantage became very difficult. Why? Because of king e2, or let's say h3, and king f2. And the king reaches the important h2 or h1 square. So black has issues and will not convert this position, most likely, unless black blunders. So therefore, of course, Hans Niemann, being a strong player, would have taken with the bishop on g2. A very beautiful game, and as mentioned earlier, we had this idea of a rook lift. If you want to learn more about rook lifts, then see you in this video. I hope you liked the game and enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of such content, feel free to like this video and leave a subscription. See you in the next video.